Patrick Johnston, let's get to the Canucks stuff right away. And I do want to point out that all this talk about will they fire the GM, will they fire the coach, what are they going to do, and so much talk around the budget. You were at Rogers and you have to wear a toque because it's so cold there. So maybe they're not paying the heating bills either.
In fairness, this is what happens when you don't have 18,000 people in the building, and it's been chilly. So I'm keeping my head warm, and we're in the Jeff Pettersson lounge, which is the area behind where we've been watching practice from. And normally our old friend J Pat would be sitting by the cozy fire, keeping warm. But,
we will touch on that stuff later, but let's start with Canucks. First of all, we're going to go with some quick hitters. What was the best thing that happened to the Canucks this week? We're going to start glass half full.
Elias Pettersson finding his form, I think. The pass to set up Brock Besser's goal was classic Pettersson stuff. The whole sequence before that, the fact a lot of lines been controlling the play. I mean, they kind of found their form last week for the most part. Long term, that's what they need. Obviously, right now they need even more, and it may be too late for the sake of the season. But yeah, the fact that Elias Pettersson seems to have found his way. I mean, you still note how frustrated he is post game. I think everyone saw the look on his face. Just the fact they couldn't win, even when they played well, they couldn't get any bounces. It's a tough spot to be in, but the form, the way he's playing, is the player that they need him to be.
What was the worst thing that happened to the Canucks this week?
They kept losing. I mean, in the end, they're here to win. They want to play, irrespective of what else may be going on around outside in terms of the organization, the media, sort of the dialogue with fans, with us. They play to win. The fact that they played so well on Thursday night and still couldn't pull out a win. I mean, they're gonna win again, but that's bad, and it's tough for Travis Green because he's tried pulling all the strings, and they had such challenge with the schedule before this week that they now finally are in a spot where they're going to actually be able to catch their breath. But in the big picture, obviously the playoffs are tough, almost impossible. And Travis Green is a coach that wants to have his best foot forward. As he goes into the offseason, whether that's re-signing with the Canucks or perhaps casting his net further afield and looking to see what else is out there. You want to be seen as a winning coach, and this is a tough spot for him right now, even with the circumstances.
Put you on the spot. What do you foresee happening for the Canucks on and off the ice in the next week?
Well, they're going to pick up some wins. I think they've played well enough. There is a surge coming back. The Flames are a tough team.
Unfortunately, it's not Serge Savard.
Yeah. The Flames are a tough team.
That's for that dad joke, but yeah.
The Flames are a tough team, and there's no doubt about that. So, but they're gonna pull off a win here. There's just no way that this goes as bad as it has. I mean, you think about some of the bad runs they had, especially in that last Willie season when they had, I think, a 9-game losing streak, an 8-game losing streak, which then they won, and then had a 6-game losing streak to close the season. This team's better than that. So they're going to have a win. It's still obviously in the big picture, like I've sort of been noting in my writing, is that, the math is really against them just in terms of counting and adding up how many wins and how many points you need. They're going to have to go on a real surge here if they're going to have any chance of making the playoffs. Off the ice, things seem to be coming to a head. I had sort of thought if there was going to be a change, they would probably wait till the off season, but the key thing I continue to understand about sort of the accolades when it comes to moments like this. And you think about how Mike Gillis got let go. Maybe Mike Gillis would have gotten let go in that offseason anyway, in 2014. But the reason why he was let go when he was because there was, booing in the building and chanting in the building, calling for his dismissal. And that's a pride. That's a brand. That's not wanting to be embarrassed. And of course, there's no fans right now. So the temperature has to be taken online. And, we're starting to see, we've seen it for a while now, I think, but more than ever this week, we're seeing on on social media for sure that fans want to see change. They want to feel there's a direction, that there's sort of positivity for the future. And so I think that pressure alone may have sped up the timeline. Certainly we're sort of getting the sense that there may be something happening. I think what that means is that, the ownership's trying to figure out what their plan really is going to be, especially when you're dealing with the fact that you're in the middle of the season. You have to deal with people potentially quarantining. You're also, in the end, the Canucks have been looking not to spend. So, how can they sort of draw a line through all that? If you're going to make a change, how much are you spending? Who are you spending it on? How do you structure all that?
Just to step in here, I've seen that rationale a lot, that they don't want to pay someone to not do anything for them.
Yeah.
But if they were to replace internally and not look for a replacement till the off season, that's kind of a point. However, I do wonder, what's the rationale of making a change now if everything has to go through ownership anyway, if it doesn't mean you can sell more tickets?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think part of the problem is that there's no obvious person internally. John Weisbrot, I suppose, is the AGM, but I don't think he sticks. If you get rid of Benning, it's hard to see them keeping his right-hand man. There are people involved who obviously have jobs to do, but there's no one that's a sort of an overall leader. I think you're securing someone who's at least going to be advising you and giving you a direction. You're moving in a new way. It's not something you can just do with the flip of the switch. And normally you could just have someone in the door tomorrow. The process should be smart. You don't just want to hire someone on a whim. That's the other thing, right? You actually want to think about, what you're looking for, who you're looking for, who's available, how they interview, what they actually have to say. The old way of doing things of just, well, he's available, let's get him, is not smart. It's not forward thinking. It's not how you want to have your organization run. I mean, there's obviously a chance that still happens, but I think that's the most important thing to recognize here, is that if you really want positive change, you don't rush this. You don't rush your choice, and so that's kind of the challenge they're faced with, I think, right now.
Go back to what you said earlier, and I kind of scratch my head over this sometimes. Obviously people were hoping after what they saw happen to the Canucks in the playoffs last year that there was momentum being built. But last night's game was the kind of game we have seen, from the Calgary's perspective. That's what we saw from the Canucks over the last 3 years. Don't necessarily play great, but Jacob Markstrom gets you the points. And this isn't to blame the goaltending, but Jacob Markstrom has elevated his game to another level. Why are people surprised that the Canucks are essentially playing the way they did last year and the year before, but they're not getting otherworldly goaltending that's bailing them out? Why are people so emotional about how poorly the team's doing when really the writing was on the wall for this kind of regression?
Well, I mean, there was a thrill to how they were playing, I think, especially last year. It papered over the cracks a little bit. There was sort of a belief of being in it. The start has been so bad and so tough, and systemically they've been so bad and so not even close to even the sort of fragile structure they were last year. I think it's just all that snowball effect, one thing after another. And they're going to have to, they found a way, I think, in the last sort of few games. I mean, I would say the Monday game in Toronto, they still lost. I don't think they were going to win that game, but they definitely were sort of finding their way a little bit. There's still, I think it's just the way they've played. I think that they've just been so poor overall that you've been able to kind of ignore the fact that they got such great goaltending, and they haven't been getting that great goaltending, and that they were sort of built on such a fragile foundation to begin with. I think that's why it's just been so dramatic and so stark. And I think that's just kind of how it has. Maybe this is just how it had to be, that there wasn't going to be change without this kind of. I don't think anybody necessarily predicted it would be this bad. I think we said that this team was going to struggle, that they needed to be goaltending, but I don't think anybody expected that it would fall off so fast, so quickly, and it would be so stark. And I think that to me is why the reaction has been the way it is. There's always been people that were saying, no, this is not going to go well. This is going to hit the wall. It's going to hit the wall, hit the wall. And at some point they were maybe going to be right, and they are right. And certainly I'd always was had issues with how the team was constructed and sort of what that meant for the future. And now they're in a spot where they're going to have to triage the whole situation and show a plan to their two young stars and say, this is going to give you a chance to become the great players that you want to be and become the league leading stars that you want to be, and make this team back into sort of one of the jewels in the crown of the NHL. It was like that 10 years ago. It certainly isn't the case now. And, that's the other thing. The fans want to see that. They want to believe that their team is a contender, that their team is one of the great teams in the NHL. And certainly we had a taste of that. And they want to have that again.
Patrick, we did a video earlier in the week on the 1040 situation. Mm-hmm. If people want to seek that out, you can go on YouTube, search the province. We have a channel where we put these videos.
It will probably play right after this one.
Well, there were tons of reaction to it, that's for sure. Now it's been a few days. In particular, I know this is tough, man. I mean, we've been through so much in the media industry. I remember people talking about the holy trinity of sports in the heyday, when the Grizzlies were around, of Province Sports, Team 1040, and Sports Page. And now here we are, ourselves much diminished, but still standing, still fighting for what we can. Thank you for your efforts with that, I must add. What was it like in the press box? What's the reaction from the media? Again, the numbers keep shrinking in terms of people who would be at a game, and it was legendary. You referenced 2011. Just think of every day in the locker room, the people were there from the media. What's the sense of guys in the media now after losing so many great colleagues?
Well, I think about the sort of framing that Ian McCletchie, who obviously was the producer for Halford and Bruff's morning show, he had a tweet the other day talking about how many people used to be in the press box, and it was sort of reflecting on a tweet from Ed Willis, who had just spoken with JPAT, and just sort of noting that there's only going to be one radio station in the stands, and not critical of them. They're the rights holder. That's how it happens. But just noting that there's
Thank you, Jim.
There's no other radio station. That's how the landscape's shifted in that regard. In many ways, they're kind of feeling what we've felt for 10 years almost now. That there's still people that cover the team, that write about the team, and they're, where they work has shifted. There's still a decent little crew of people, but it's certainly, it's a far cry from the days where there were 4 guys from the province, 4 guys from the Sun, a bunch of guys from radio stations, a bunch of guys from a couple TV stations. I mean, that was such a sort of rigid, formalized structure, and that's not how it always had to be. But, and there's, like I said, it's still a decent crew of people here, but it's, there's nobody here from 1040, right? There's no 1040. They literally, JPAT would have been here every game, and sometimes there'd be 1 or 2 other guys from 1040. There's nobody from, there's nobody independent of the Canucks broadcast that's here. News 1130 would have had a reporter here. NW would have had a reporter here. That's just not a thing. It's been replaced to some degree. It's good. There's people from other online outlets here, like Canucks Army and Daily Hive and Passabulis, like they're here, and that's good. That's good for media. That's good to have more voices. But it's not the sort of large presence, sort of team presence that you could say that, it's me or Kuz that's at a game, basically. There's no, we used to have several people. It's, you could actually coordinate a little bit, and it's kind of on you to figure that out. And that's, in general, that's, it's better when you have more voices and more people thinking about stuff, no matter whether you agree with them or not.
Well, you say there's no one there from 1040. If someone does show up with a 1040 pass, they're going to have white pancake makeup, a big red nose, and who's bigger than Eric Rolfson. For those who don't know, former Province Sports editor who had like size 17 feet or something ridiculous. So, Patrick, it is still sad. I can't get over it. Very angry, very, very angry, but we'll let it go there. Hopefully, the interest in the Canucks, they say the worst thing you can have is apathy, and right now people still care about the Canucks. So hopefully next week, we see things start to change for them.
Well, and I'll just take a moment to repeat what I've said elsewhere about, if you are frustrated about sort of the way things shook out this week, that's partly an issue of regulation in government, and people need to speak up, make your voice heard. I know it seems a bit twee and a bit, people are cynical, but like, make this an issue in your sort of political life. Call up your MP, send them a letter, say this is something that concerns me. I want to have more local media ownership, because this isn't just about sports. This is about the fact that in the old days there were hundreds of reporters in the press gallery in Ottawa, right, representing all little communities across Canada with their own little issues. Like we have big broad issues, of course, but everybody has their little things, and a lot of that stuff comes from government and how that gets dealt with, and they don't know that unless people speak up. And it's harder than ever to speak up, because we used to have advocates, we used to have reporters, whether it was sports or whether it was politics. Yeah. And there's just fewer of that now. And if you want that to change, and you want to create scenarios where it's easier for local ownership to happen and things like that, that is a conversation that needs to happen in a broader aspect. And I encourage people to find out who their MP, call them up, and start their journey towards speaking up on these kinds of topics.
Great stuff, Patrick. We will continue to do these videos a couple times a week, but
I will try to stay warm.
Yeah, Canucks Flames next couple. Let's see what happens. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Paul.